Welcome to another episode of Millennial Money.
So this week we had a question about the different types of car finance. So that means the different types available when you go to buy a purchase and finance a brand new car.
So what we're going to do to try and help explain this is there's going to be more people on the video than normal. Andy's going to be on the video. I'm looking at Andy in the background. Justin's going to appear on the video. He's waving at the moment. You can't see that. And I'm going to be on here because there are three main ways that people finance a car. So we're ignoring about taking out short-term loans or cash. We'll talk about that another time, but we're talking about the main ways you can get car finance. So they are PCP, they are hire purchase, and they are leasing. Now I'm going to start on PCP because interestingly each of us in the office have done one of them in the past. So PCP I've done in the past, and it stands for personal contract purchase, and it's a form of financing a car where you actually own it, but you don't pay all the money up front. So PCP works by you paying an initial amount on a car. So if it's say 20 grand car, you may pay a couple of thousand initial up front. Then you finance a whole chunk of that, and then at the end you pay a lump sum. So let's say they work out that your car's going to be worth £12,000 at the end of an agreed 3-year term. Then they deduct what you paid up front, the small amount, and you finance the rest of it with a low interest rate. And the amount you pay at the end is dictated by an agreement of, you may say, the number of miles you do. So if you say you're going to drive your car only every now and then, and you're going to do very low mileage, let's say you do £7,000–8,000 a year, then they'll predict your car is going to be worth more at the end of the 3 years, and therefore the amount that you're going to have to pay as a lump sum if you want to buy the car is equal to that amount. But it means you actually finance a small amount, so it makes your monthly payment smaller. Now, what's important is at the end of the 3 years, you are paying your monthly amounts. You have three options at the end. So you've been paying all your instalments every month. So let's say it could be £100 a month or whatever it is. At the end of the 3 years, you have three options. You can pay the agreed lump sum at the end, the amount the car is worth. So they estimate that might be £12,000. You can pay that. You could, if you wanted to, you could just walk away. You could decide, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore, and hand the keys back. Crucially for the car company, that's why they have the T's and C's to ensure that the car is worth £12,000, say, that they will look at the car and say, is it worth the £12,000 we predicted? If it is, then you can walk away. If it's not, let's say you've been driving halfway around the world or you've damaged the car, then if it's worth less than the agreed amount that you thought it would be, you're going to have to pay the difference. The third and final option is to take that car and maybe part exchange it against a new one. So you start the whole cycle again. So that is PCP in a nutshell. The things you have to watch out for is there will be T's and C's. There'll be a side of the bargain that you have to keep up as a driver. So you may have to keep to an agreed mileage limit. You may have to service the car every year at specified garages that may be official dealerships. And if you don't, then that may invalidate, say, the warranty that you have, which will obviously knock down the price of the car. So PCP allows you to buy a car more cheaply, but you have the option to own it at the end. And what it means is the car is actually in your name. So if you get a speeding ticket, the speeding ticket arrives at your house. The reason I mention that is because on some of the other types of financing, you don't own a car. And so there's slight nuances, which Andy and Justin will come on to in a second.
It's also very important to remember within the T's and C's, especially within a PCP, where they add on the mileage. If you commit to doing a certain amount of mileage a year, because I know they offer a lot of attractive deals, adverts on the telly, you know, 0% interest and 0% deposit, but there'll be a clause and it'll be 8,000 miles a year. So if you go in at 8,000 miles a year but end up doing 20,000 miles a year, you have to be really careful because they will charge you at a certain, say, 0.46p per mile, but obviously over 12,000 miles, that is a lot of money, so you have to be really conscious of that.
Yeah, so PCP is an option that allows you to buy a car, but it doesn't mean it always works out to be that great value. You've got to bear that in mind because you're financing a car, it's depreciating in value as soon as you buy it, and you're also getting caught into this contract, this vicious circle where at the end you've got these options, but it could mean that you drive off with a nice new car at the beginning and you're all happy, but you could have some form of penalties towards the end.
Okay, so now we've got Justin. I know he looks a lot like Damien, but I promise you this is a different person. So Justin, actually, he has had a car in the past on hire purchase. So he was just going to explain how hire purchase works for you when you want to finance a new car.
So hire purchase is, in effect, if I was to explain my own situation, is that I actually wanted to own the car outright after 3 years. So I've generally always tried to own cars. Be it in cash or a loan. I owned a car and I begrudgingly had to buy a new one, so I thought actually within 3 years I want to own that car. So I went for hire purchase, because what hire purchase does is you pay your payments over 3 years, 4 years typically, and at the end of that you then own the vehicle outright. So typically, as in my example, you have an initial payment and then you have another 35 payments that are of an agreed amount, and the very last payment sometimes is considered balloon payment, slightly large or can be quite large, to pay off the vehicle. And at the end of that, I then own that vehicle. So my current car is on hire purchase and I will own that vehicle at the end of the 36 months. The benefit of hire purchase is that you own the vehicle. There are drawbacks, because obviously I financed all the depreciation, as Damien has mentioned about depreciation earlier. That's basically where you drive off the forecourt and you lose a lot of money straight away. In the first 3 years, you lose a lot of value on a car. The other thing that, in my case, which was a benefit, is on hire purchases, you can tend to put down larger deposits. And so I put down quite a large deposit because I had owned a car. So I put that down as part exchange, and then the rest of the value was over the next 36 months. So in short, hire purchase is really for those people that want to own a car outright at the end. T's and C's don't tend to apply to hire purchases because I, in fact, will own that car. So the dealer doesn't really matter. The dealer doesn't really care how many miles I do, because I'm depreciating the vehicle that I have agreed at the end of that 36 months that I will pay all the payments and I will own.
I didn't actually even know that.
Yeah. So in theory, the more miles I do, the value of the car goes down, but the dealer doesn't care, because the dealer is not in a position where your PCP, I'm going to hand it back, or he's made buy it off me. It literally is going to be my car after 36 months. So the T's and C's don't tend to be quite as strict.
Okay, so now we've got Andy, who's actually going to talk about leasing a vehicle.
Yeah, so I've leased a vehicle, which is different to what Justin and Damien have explained. So I never really wanted to own the car. I didn't have a lot of money to put down at the end. I never really had that money, and I knew I wouldn't have that money. So I decided I wanted to effectively rent my vehicle, which is what leasing is. So I will put an amount down at the start, and normally it's about between 1 and 3 months up front. And that's like a deposit for them, so that they know that you're a serious person who's going to look after the car. You'll then pay monthly payments, typically between 3 years and 5 years. I personally did mine over 4 years, which actually you have to be careful of, because I didn't realise at the time that most warranties on new vehicles only last for 3 years. So I was out of warranty for a while. So that's something to look out for. But then at the end of the policy, I don't have an option to keep the car. My option is to hand it back. So Damien and Justin explained different versions of whether you need to hand. Damien basically had a choice. Did he want to hand it back? Did he want to keep it? Did he want to refinance to a new deal? Justin, he wanted to keep the car. Well, I never had the option to keep the car, and I never wanted to. There's other things to remember with leasing. You never own the car. So the car will actually be owned by the people you lease it from, typically a finance company. And then what will happen is they will actually pay the tax for you, and that's included within the cost that you pay every month, which is pretty good for me. I know I'm paying one fixed fee, and that's going to take me right through to the end. One thing to be careful of at the end of a lease is they're going to look around that car and think to themselves, what damage has been made, and do we need to charge them any more at the end? So be careful at the end of that term. You might have to pay maybe a couple of thousand back if there's damage on that car, or if you've gone over your mileage, they'll actually charge you an amount for every mile you've gone over. Yeah. Now I know on my contract it's 12p a mile, so if you go over by a few thousand, that's a significant cost to be aware of. So that's it, that's what leasing is, basically renting the vehicle.
So Damien mentioned earlier about speeding tickets. Is that right, that with leasing that your still liable, but it doesn't come directly to your address.
Yeah, so basically the ticket will effectively go to the people who own the vehicle, which is the lease company. And so you'll get a nasty letter from them saying, by the way, Mr. Leaks, you've been a naughty boy. We've paid this fine on your behalf because we own the vehicle, but you now owe us money. And typically they will charge an admin fee on top of that as well.
Wow, okay,
so that does happen.
Okay, so that's the summary of the different ways that you can finance a brand new vehicle. It is actually worth remembering that if you look in the T's and C's of your contract, there are some contracts that allow you, if you have paid up to and over half of the value of the vehicle, some of them offer an early termination of the contract. So that means that as long as you've paid over half of the cost of the whole vehicle, you can walk away with no fees and nothing else to pay. So you can just walk away and leave that vehicle before the end of the 3-year contract. So a lot of people don't tell you about that, but that is something that you can actually do. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, it might be worth looking into that.
And that's on the PCP, is that right? The personal contract?
That's on the PCP,
right.
And I believe you can actually also do that on the hire purchase. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, then you need to have a look in your contract to see if that is something that you can do. Okay, so thanks so much for your questions. Keep them coming. Thanks so much for watching. As usual, head over to our social media channels, our Facebook, Money to the Masses, our Instagram at Money to the Masses, and our Twitter at Money to the Masses with the number 2. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks very much, and see you all next week. Okay, so thanks so much for watching.
Sorry, you'll need to do it again. I did a little look up today and it would look really weird that. I wondered if Damien wanted anything else. Yeah.
The questions in.
Sorry.
Keep the
That's all right.
questions coming.